The greatest general you've never heard of, Subutai impossible conquests. Picture this. A blacksmith, son from the frozen forests of Siberia, becomes the architect of the largest land empire in human history. He commands armies across distances that would make Alexander the Great weep. He defeats European knights, Chinese dynasties, and Middle Eastern sultanates with equal brilliance. He wins more battles than Napoleon and conquers more territory than any general in history. Yet somehow, his name remains whispered only in the shadows of military academies. This is the story of Subutai, the Mongol military genius who rewrote the rules of warfare and came terrifyingly close to conquering all of Europe. The blacksmith, the son who would topple kingdoms born in 1175, to a family of reindeer herders and blacksmiths in the Siberian taiga, young Subutai seemed destined for obscurity. But fate had other plans. When he was barely a teenager, his older brother Gelmay became one of Genghis Khan's earliest followers. Subutai tagged along, wide-eyed and ambitious to serve the rising warlord who would change the world. What Genghis Khan saw in this awkward youth remains one of history's great mysteries. Subutai wasn't born into nobility. He lacked the pedigree of the Mongol aristocracy. Yet something in his penetrating gaze and tactical instincts caught the great Khan's attention. Perhaps it was the moment when 17-year-old Subutai, in his first battle, charged ahead of his commanders to capture an enemy general. Or perhaps Genghis simply recognized a kindred spirit, someone who saw war not as glory, but as geometry. The campaign that should have been impossible. Here's where Subutai's story becomes almost unbelievable. In 1219, while pursuing a fleeing enemy prince, Subutai proposed something audacious, a reconnaissance mission that would circle the entire Caspian Sea. But this wasn't just any scouting expedition. Subutai would take 20,000 cavalry on a 3-year, 8,000-mile journey through completely unknown territory, defeating every army that stood in his way. Think about that for a moment. Without maps, without GPS, without supply lines, he would navigate through deserts, mountains, and hostile kingdoms, coordinating movements with the main Mongol army hundreds of miles away. Military historians still struggle to comprehend the logistics, and he didn't just survive, he thrived. Subutai crushed the Georgians, arguably the finest warriors in the Caucasus. He defeated the Alans through cunning diplomacy, turning their allies against them. Then came his masterpiece, the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, where he faced 80,000 Russian and Cuman warriors with barely a quarter of their numbers. The battle that terrified Europe. What happened at Kalka River should be studied in every military academy. Subutai orchestrated a false retreat that lasted for 9 days. 9 days of apparent panic and disorganization, with the Mongols fleeing before the Russian coalition. The European forces, confident of victory, abandoned their defensive positions and pursued what they believed was a broken enemy. It was all theater. On the 9th day, on ground Subutai had chosen, the Mongols turned. Fresh cavalry reserves appeared from concealed positions. The Russian army, strung out and exhausted from the chase, was systematically destroyed. 6 princes died that day. The survivors brought back tales of an unstoppable eastern horde that fought like nothing Europe had ever seen. But here's the twist that sends chills down historians' spines. This wasn't even a conquest. It was reconnaissance. Subutai was just gathering information. The general who conquered more than his emperor. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, Subutai was already in his 50s, ancient by Mongol standards, where warriors typically retired to their tents by 40. Yet under Genghis's son, Ögedei, Subutai embarked on his greatest campaigns. He became the supreme commander of Mongol forces, orchestrating multiple armies across continents with a sophistication that wouldn't be matched until the age of radio. In China, he devised the strategy that finally broke the Jin dynasty, one of the most powerful empires in Asia. The campaign lasted years and required coordinating multiple armies across impossible terrain. Subutai solved problems that should have been unsolvable. How to conquer fortified cities without siege equipment, he built it on site. How to cross rivers under enemy fire, he used boats filled with stones to create artificial fords. How to supply armies in hostile territory, he didn't. His forces lived off the land with ruthless efficiency. The invasion that nearly erased Europe. But Subutai's most terrifying achievement came in 1241, when he was 65 years old, and so obese from decades of campaign life that he needed a cart to move around. He convinced Ogadai to let him invade Europe with 150,000 warriors, and he attacked on 5 fronts simultaneously. Consider the military brilliance. Subutai split his forces and invaded Hungary and Poland at the same time, coordinating attacks separated by hundreds of miles in an age without telecommunications. In Poland, he defeated a combined force of Polish and German knights at Legnica. That same day, the exact same day, he crushed the Hungarian army at Mohi in what is considered one of the most perfectly executed military operations in history. At Mohi, Subutai demonstrated why he terrified everyone. He let the Hungarian king believe he had the Mongols trapped against a river. Then, under cover of night, Subutai built a bridge downstream and crossed a portion of his army. At dawn, while his main force attacked head-on, his flanking cavalry appeared behind the Hungarian lines. But here's the genius. He deliberately left one route of escape open. Why? Because Subutai understood human psychology. Trapped men fight desperately. But men who see a route to safety break ranks and flee and become easy prey for cavalry. The Hungarian army disintegrated. 70,000 soldiers died in the pursuit. The road to Vienna, Paris, and Rome lay open. The death that saved Europe. Europe stood on the precipice. The Mongol armies were days away from Vienna. No military force on the continent could stop them. The knights had failed. The castles would fall. Medieval Europe, with all its cathedrals and universities and emerging nation-states, seemed doomed to become another province in the Mongol Empire. And then, impossibly, the Mongols withdrew. Ugadai Khan had died in Mongolia, and Mongol law required all princes and generals to return for the election of a new Khan. Subutai, loyal to the end, turned his undefeated armies around and rode back east. He would never return. Age and politics kept him from launching another European campaign. But his reconnaissance reports, his maps, his intelligence on European weaknesses, these all survived. For decades after, European princes lived in terror of the day the Mongols would come back. The legacy. Written in conquest, Subutai died in 1248 at the age of 73, having spent nearly 60 years in military service. His record speaks volumes. More than 60 pitched battles, all victories. Campaigns on 3 continents. Approximately 1.5 million square miles of territory conquered, more than any general in human history. He commanded over 20 campaigns and never lost a single one. Yet his greatest achievement might be what he didn't do. Unlike so many conquerors, Subutai never rebelled, never attempted to seize power for himself. He remained the loyal general, the brilliant strategist who served his Khans with utter devotion. Perhaps this is why he's been forgotten by popular history. He lacked the ego that makes historical figures memorable. But make no mistake, Subutai changed the world. He proved that warfare could be a science, that intelligence and logistics mattered more than individual valor, that mobility and communication could overcome any fortification. Modern military doctrine, the combined arms tactics, the emphasis on speed and surprise, the coordination of forces over vast distances, all of it traces back to the innovations of a blacksmith, his son from Siberia. The next time you hear about Genghis Khan's conquests, remember, many of those victories bore Subutai's fingerprints. He was the sword that carved out an empire. He was the mind that made the impossible routine. He was, quite possibly, the greatest general who ever lived. And Europe's survival? That came down to the death of one man, thousands of miles away, at precisely the right moment. One of history's most consequential might-have-beens.